What more could the United States do to help Ukraine win the war against Russia? The US is already the biggest single military aid giver to Ukraine in the world, with the country having ponied up $56 billion in funding to date, according to the BBC. The Kiel Institute, which tracks aid to Ukraine per country, puts the number even higher at $92.33 billion. The next nearest country in terms of sheer volume of aid provided is Germany at around $16 billion, and most of that money is dedicated to helping refugees. Ukraine has received an enormous amount of money from the US, and it's about to get more. The United States has dealt Russia a devastating blow with the announcement of a new round of funding that's going to set Ukraine up to take the war beyond 2024. As Putin hopes his meat grinder tactics will wear out Ukrainian resistance, this new blow sends a clear message from the US. It's time to get out of Ukraine. But what makes America's latest donation to Ukraine's war chest so important? And why is this yet another signal from the US to Putin that it's time for him to wind up a war that he has no chance of winning? We'll explain everything in this video. Let's start with the donation. On September 26, 2024, the BBC reported that active President Joe Biden, along with the United States Congress, had granted rapid approval for a military aid package worth $8 billion. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was quick to thank both for the money. The donation also acted as a symbol of the strengthening bonds between the US and Ukraine, as it was made during a visit by Zelensky to Washington. CNBC offered more details about the aid. Around $5.5 billion of the $8 billion will be donated before the end of America's fiscal year, which concluded on September 30th. That was a very purposeful choice. The end of the fiscal year would have marked the expiry of the funding authority, meaning the US had to get that money out soon or risk having it added to its 2024-25 budget. The rest of the money is dedicated to the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, or USAI. That's an interesting choice. The USAI allows a donating country to purchase weapons for Ukraine from private companies rather than delivering weapons directly from their own stock. That means around $2.5 billion of the aid Ukraine is set to receive will be brand new weapons purchased specifically to serve the country's strategic goals or materials Ukraine can use to build weapons internally. I am grateful to the United States for providing the items that are most critical to protecting our people, Zelensky said on X, following Biden's announcement. As President Biden approaches the end of his term in January 2025, this donation may be one of the final aid packages of his administration. At this point, you may be wondering why this is such a major move on America's part. After all, the $8 billion is part of a $61 billion aid package that the United States announced in April 2024. That package took months to make it through the US House of Representatives, in large part because House Republicans objected to sending money to Ukraine rather than using it to deal with America's border issues. But the package made it through and is fully approved, meaning the $8 billion was always going to make its way to Ukraine. So why is this aid such a strategic blow to Russia? There are a few reasons, starting with the timing of the aid package. We just touched on how House Republicans managed to successfully delay America's $61 billion aid package for several months. That move was indicative of an increasingly frosty relationship between Ukraine's president and the Republican Party. During his campaign, President-elect Donald Trump expressed concerns about the volume of US aid to Ukraine, criticizing Zelensky's approach to negotiations with Putin. "Those cities are gone. They're gone," Trump claimed in September 2024, while talking about Zelensky's handling of the Ukraine war and the losses imposed on his country. "And we continue to give billions of dollars to a man who refused to make a deal, Zelensky," Trump claimed. He went on to state that there was no deal Putin could offer that wouldn't leave Ukraine in a better position than it's in now. All of these comments were made during Trump's campaign speech at Mint Hill in North Carolina. They came amidst news that Republican lawmakers were trying to investigate how much taxpayer money was spent to provide Zelensky with a security detail during his September visit to the US. Zelensky has also levied criticism at the Republican Party, with CNN reporting that he called Trump's running partner, J.D. Vance, too radical. It all adds up to a tumultuous relationship between Zelensky and the party that has recently come to power. That brings us back to the timing issue. Biden's decision to approve the $8 billion in September ensured the funds reached Ukraine before the fiscal year end. His approving the $8 billion now ensures that Ukraine has weapons it needs to continue the fight for a while longer, and that's bad news for Putin. More bad news comes from the fact that Biden used a mechanism called a presidential drawdown to deliver the aid to Ukraine. The BBC spoke to Orysia Lutsevich, who heads the Ukrainian Forum at Chatham House, to discuss the move. What is interesting is Biden says he can deploy quickly some of the weapons that are in US storage as part of his presidential drawdown authority, she told the British news outlet. That would mean changing dynamics on the ground based on when the weapons arrive in Ukraine, with the potential for those changes to occur much quicker than is typical. So what's a presidential drawdown? The US Department of State website says that a US president has the power to direct an immediate drawdown under Section 506A1 of the Foreign Assistance Act, or FAA. The FAA was designed to allow the US to respond quickly to crises with immediate changes in foreign policy. Specifically, Section 506A1 allows America to quickly deliver defense articles and services from Department of Defense stocks to foreign countries and international organizations to respond to unforeseen emergencies. Biden's administration has used presidential drawdown authority 55 times in preparation for Putin's special military operation in Ukraine. That may make his latest usage of the authority seem unimportant, given that it seems to be standard practice for sending aid to Ukraine. However, that's not the case. For one, Biden has used his drawdown powers because of the fiscal year deadline that loomed when he made the $8 billion donation announcement. The $5.5 billion of weaponry being delivered to Ukraine directly from the US is the last that Biden could provide using his drawdown powers. That's bad news for Putin. The drawdown guarantees that Ukraine will receive the $8 billion in aid, regardless of the recent change in US administration. While Putin may have anticipated a shift in US policy following the election, this package ensures continued support for Ukraine without delay. On September 23, 2024, just 3 days before Biden announced the $8 billion aid package, the BBC reported that Zelensky intended to present a victory plan to Biden, Trump, and Harris during his state visit. The move was painted as a persuasive effort. Zelensky wanted to show Washington that he knew exactly how to use any aid delivered to him. Plus, he hoped his victory plan might represent the final push he needed to convince the US to allow Ukraine to use American long-range missiles on Russian territory. The victory plan must have worked. Zelensky came away from the United States with an $8 billion commitment. At the time of the BBC's reporting, few details were known about Zelensky's victory plan beyond vague statements, such as the Ukrainian president's claim on X that the fall would determine the future of this war. In the days that followed Zelensky's US visit, more details emerged about the plan. The Guardian reported that an unconditional invite to join NATO lay at its heart, with Ukraine seeing such an invite as the perfect counter to Russian aggression. After all, Article 5 of the NATO treaty says that an attack on a single NATO member represents an attack on all of them, with a collective response being the natural consequence. That commitment would show Putin that his geopolitical ambitions were headed for defeat, according to Zelensky, though it's part of his plan that isn't likely to come to fruition while the war is ongoing. NATO doesn't want to enter a direct war with Russia right now, which it would be obligated to fight if Ukraine was a NATO member. NATO chief Mark Rutte demonstrated this hesitance when responding to Zelensky's plan, saying the organization would take note of the proposal. However, he also added that the plan has many aspects and many political and military issues we really need to hammer out with the Ukrainians to understand what's behind it. In other words, Zelensky's strategy isn't just to join NATO and let over 30 other countries help him handle Putin. There's some actual substance here, substance that may have convinced the US to fast-track the $8 billion in military aid. This will terrify Putin, especially as the plan seems to be comprehensive enough to convince the US to deliver such a devastating financial blow. Other information we know about the plan comes from unintended leaks, at least on Zelensky's part. On October 30th, Politico confirmed that the Ukrainian president had asked the US for Tomahawk cruise missiles as part of his plan. The information was never meant to get out. Those missiles can fly for up to 932 miles, with Zelensky clearly hoping to get his hands on them so he can attack Russian targets. And this was confidential information between Ukraine and the White House. Zelensky raged in response to the leak. How should we understand these messages? So it means between partners there's nothing confidential? Perhaps signs of friction are emerging between the US and Ukraine. But setting that aside, it's clear from this leak that Zelensky's plan relies on more than NATO membership. The plan contains a military strategy that the US seems to support. Ukraine says as much. A Ukrainian official familiar with the plan told Politico, saying, "We know the plan is realistic. US's own military studied it and said it's realistic." That may be the most telling aspect of the plan, and the thing that prompted America to deliver this latest blow to Putin's regime. Around $8 billion is on its way to Ukraine because the United States is convinced Zelensky has figured out a way to win the war. It just needs the right weapons to push Zelensky's strategy forward. That brings us to the most important aspect of the $8 billion military aid package, what it actually delivers to Ukraine on the strategic front. Reuters reports that the aid will include munitions, weapons to fight against Russian drone attacks, and materials Ukraine can use to produce its own weapons. The last point is important. Ukraine says it's developed its own new long-range missile. What we do know for certain, thanks to the previously mentioned CNBC report, is that an additional Patriot battery is part of the $8 billion aid package. The Patriot has been a standout of Ukraine's anti-air strategy throughout the war. The missile system, which is also America's primary anti-air system, can carry and launch up to 4 PAC-2 or 16 PAC-3 missiles, simultaneously, depending on the version of the launcher. Each of those missiles, which are also part of the $8 billion package, comes equipped with a track-via-missile or TVM guidance system. That allows the missile to not only be programmed with a target before launch, but to make real-time course corrections based on data transmitted to the missile from a mobile engagement control center while it's in flight. TVM allows the Patriot system to make the most out of missiles that can travel for up to 43 miles while achieving a flight ceiling of 14.9 miles, ideal for taking out incoming fighter planes, drones, and Russian bombs. Ukraine has already put the Patriots it has to great use. In June 2024, Business Insider reported on Ukraine using its Patriot batteries to take out a Russian A-50 spy plane. The move was deemed historic by Assistant Chief of Staff of the 10th Army Air and Missile Defense Command, Colonel Rosanna Clement. She noted that Ukraine uses Patriots to defend both static sites and national infrastructure, while also pointing out Ukraine's clever ambush tactics. Those tactics are unlike anything Clement has seen in 22 years of being an air defender, and they show that even a single additional Patriot battery heading to Ukraine is bad news for Russia. And it's not just more Patriot missiles that Putin has to worry about. CNBC also says that the US has committed to providing more training for Ukraine's growing fleet of F-16 pilots. The United States hasn't provided F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine directly, despite Zelensky's repeated pleas for the planes. However, Ukraine has received F-16s from several of its European allies, with the first 6 arriving in the country back in August 2024. More are coming. The Center for Strategic and International Studies says that several European countries, including Denmark and the Netherlands, have combined to form a consortium that has committed 65 F-16s to Ukraine. The Guardian places the number even higher. It says 85 F-16s are on their way, with most likely arriving in 2025. Either way, Ukraine is getting its hands on fighter jets that could help it secure pockets of air superiority over Russian positions, opening the door for ground assaults. F-16s can also help Ukraine defend itself from Russia's missile, drone, and bomb strikes, as was proven when F-16s shot down at least 4 Russian missiles during a late August strike. But those planes need pilots. America's commitment to training more of these pilots means that Putin will have to rethink his aerial strategy. He may have hoped to rely on the fact that most of Ukraine's fighter pilots are only familiar with the Soviet-era flying systems the country had before he launched his special military operation. F-16s are far more complicated beasts than those planes. With the US providing more training, Ukraine will have more qualified pilots ready to fly when the next batches of F-16s arrive from Europe. That boosts the country's aerial offensive and defensive power considerably, especially in terms of giving Ukraine the ability to attack Russian positions behind the front lines. Russia doesn't want that. It also doesn't want Ukraine to have access to a missile that's also been promised as part of America's $8 billion aid package, the Joint Standoff Weapon or JSOW. Forbes calls this weapon a new-to-Ukraine glide bomb that Ukraine can launch from behind the front lines and rely upon to travel 70 miles to reach a Russian target. A single JSOW weighs 1,065 pounds and carries a powerful warhead that varies depending on the missile's variant. The AGM-154A 145 Blue 97, for example, is a warhead that delivers combined effect bomblets to a target. There are also variants of the JSOW that carry a broach multi-stage warhead to give the weapon penetrative power against well-guarded targets, such as industrial facilities and weapon storage bunkers. Each JSOW comes equipped with wings, allowing it to glide, and combines a GPS with an inertial navigation system to ensure it hits its target. Add a terminal infrared seeker into that guidance mix, and you get a bomb that's far more accurate than the makeshift glide bombs Russia has pelted at Ukraine over the past couple of years. Why is the JSOW so important? The answer comes down to 2 S's: strategy and stockpiles. On the strategic side, the JSOW finally allows Ukraine to use Russia's tactics against it. After the abject failure of Putin's attempts to gain air superiority over Ukraine using fighter jets and helicopters, Russia has lost 369 of the former, including spy planes, and 329 of the latter, according to Ukraine's Ministry of Finance. He turned to Soviet-era bombs to attack Ukraine. These bombs have devastated Ukrainian cities. For instance, Russia used around 200 of them in a single week to batter the Ukrainian town of Vovchansk during its assault on Kharkiv in May 2024. March 2024 alone saw Russia drop 3,000 of these bombs on Ukraine, according to Zelensky. Russia usually uses the Fab 1500, a 1.65-ton Soviet-era weapon, to create its glide bombs. Strap a glide kit costing between $20,000 and $30,000 to a Fab 1500 and voila! Russia has a devastating weapon it can launch from behind the front lines at Ukraine. And that's the important point. The wings built into the glide bomb allow it to be launched from 10 miles away from its intended target. That means Russia can launch such bombs from its planes without putting those aircraft in the firing lines of Ukraine's anti-air defenses. Ukraine didn't have a comparable weapon to Russia's glide bombs, until now. With the JSOW, Ukraine turns the tables on Russia with a bomb it can also launch from safe positions that will devastate Russian fortifications. The JSOW also makes Ukraine's incoming fleet of F-16s more versatile, as they're launchable from that plane. As for stockpiles, the United States had a total production plan that would result in 3,334 JSOW units being manufactured back in 2015. Defense Express says that it's used around 400 of those missiles in Iraq and Afghanistan, noting that it's possible to assume that there may be more than 2,000 JSOW units left in the United States. That's a lot of missiles. Don't underestimate the importance of Ukraine having access to such extensive stockpiles. The US won't provide all of these JSOWs to Ukraine. It hasn't even announced how many will be part of the $8 billion package, but the fact that such extensive stockpiles exist means Ukraine doesn't have to worry about running out of a weapon that will prove vital in its efforts to devastate Russian fortifications within its own country. Ukraine basically has JSOWs on tap now, with those being delivered as part of America's aid package likely being the first of many that expand the country's tactical capabilities. So what does all of this mean for Russia? The United States has used its $8 billion aid package to send the clear message that it's time for Russia to get out of Ukraine. The timing is very deliberate, both in terms of American budgetary issues and because this package represents the last of Biden's drawdowns. Putin may have hoped the change in US administration would stymie the flow of weapons to Ukraine, but Biden's $8 billion package ensures continued support regardless of the transition. As for the weapons being delivered, each gives Ukraine a tactical advantage over Russia. Another Patriot battery will prove just as useful as those already in Ukraine. More trained F-16 pilots in Ukraine will make better use of the fighter jets that are due to pour into the country from its European allies. And with the JSOW, Ukraine finally has a weapon that allows it to go shot for shot with Russia and its glide bomb strategy. It's clear the US is not only confident in Zelensky's victory plan, but is actively supporting it with the weapons Ukraine's president needs. What do you think about America's $8 billion funding package? How devastating of a blow does it deliver to a Russian leader who hopes that Ukraine will run out of weapons? How do you think Ukraine will use its new JSOWs? Share your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching the video. Now go and check out Australia just dealt Russia another devastating blow, or click this other video instead.